Under the open sky, I feel the energy. I lace up my shoes, locking in my resolve. Running fuels my passion and propels me forward. It's not about the finish line. It's about the journey. Running isn't just what I do. It's who I am. This is who I am.
So the video you just watched was shot entirely on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. We filmed that in like under 2 hours, and I wanted to try something new. So I challenged myself to film a cinematic run video with my iPhone. And it was definitely a lot of fun, and I think the results turned out great. So in this video, I wanted to share with you my experience from this shoot and give you some tips on how you can shoot your own cinematic run video on your iPhone. Now, before we dive in, I want to give a big shout out to my friends Megan, who played as the runner, and Jay, who captured all of the behind the scenes magic. You guys, you rock! And also a huge thanks to ARTLIST for sponsoring this video and supporting this channel. I'll tell you more about them later. So first off, let's talk about the camera gear I used. By the way, I will drop links to all the products mentioned in the video description below. So I shot the entire running video handheld with the newer cage. That is the 2nd generation. I love the handheld look for this shoot because it gave the video an energetic vibe that I was going after. It really adds that sense of movement and action to the video, and using 2 handles made the handheld movement look more natural. Plus, it lets me easily maneuver the camera to capture different angles, which is a big reason I was able to get these shots so quickly. And the reason why I opt for the newer cage is because I can mount accessories to enhance the look of my video. For instance, I used a magnetic VND filter by Freewell to cut down the light and achieve a more natural motion blur in my video. Plus, I've used a mist filter to soften the highlights and overall image, reducing some of that digital over sharpening that phone cameras typically produce. Now, if you want to learn more about the newer cage, I've got a separate video comparing it with the small rig cage. I'll make sure to leave a link below. I also added an SSD so I can record Apple Log externally. Otherwise, I'd run out of space on my iPhone pretty soon because the file size are really huge. And the reason why I like to film in Apple Log, because log footage preserves more image information in the highlights and shadows, allowing for greater flexibility in the editing process, especially when color grading. And that's basically the gear setup I use. Now, regarding the camera settings, I used the new free Final Cut camera app because it gives me complete manual control over my camera. Now, if you're a beginner and are new to the Final Cut camera app, I've got a beginner's tutorial that I'll share in the video description as well. So the frame rate I've set to 25 frames per second and the resolution to 4K. The dynamic range is set to log, and I'm using the Apple ProRes codec. And remember that log files straight out of the camera look flat and have low contrast and saturation, so you'll have to color grade your footage in the edit to bring back that natural color and contrast. Unfortunately, the Final Cut camera app doesn't support importing LUTs, which makes it hard to judge the exposure. However, you can use the overexposure indicator to detect if you have blown out highlights. I've also connected a 1 terabyte Samsung SSD, which the Final Cut camera will automatically detect and select. Now, looking at the advanced settings, I've turned on grid overlay to have the rule of thirds show up, and this makes it really easy to set my composition. Now, all the shots were captured using the main 24mm lens, as this is the better lens of all 3 and provides greater shallow depth of field to help separate the subject from the background. I've also locked the orientation and set it to left because the camera is set to the left side, and the focus I've set to auto. As for the exposure settings, I've set the shutter speed to double the frame rate and the ISO to its lowest number, 64, and then I've adjusted the VND filter to balance the exposure. And lastly, I locked the white balance to 5600 Kelvin as it was sunny outside. So now that we covered the technical settings, let's talk about how I created these shots to help you improve your mobile filmmaking skills. So tip number 1 is to film slightly from a lower angle. If you want to make someone look more powerful or dominant, try filming them from a lower angle. Plus, it's way more dynamic and exciting since we're seeing everything at eye level most of the time. In almost every shot, you'll notice I have the camera positioned just below eye level. And for those super low shots, the newer cage handle is awesome because you can quickly switch to a top handle. This makes it much more comfortable to hold the camera low and keeps your shot steady. Now, tip number 2 is to make use of backlighting. You can see in a few of my shots how the backlighting adds a nice glow around the subject. It gives the shot more depth and contrast, making the subject appear dark while the background is bright. I also love playing around with the backlight with the sun popping in and out behind her to create a visual interest. And when you film against the sun with an iPhone, unfortunately, you get those little green dots known as lens flares. Now, they're not as nice as when you would film with a traditional camera, but I didn't find them too distracting. If you want to avoid these lens flares, try using a lens hood or changing your position and camera angle because it's hard to get rid of them in the edit. Now, tip number 3 is to add camera movement. One of my favorite shots is Megan running across the frame while I push in with the camera. It builds tension and directs attention to the title and the subject. I also like this shot where Megan is running in the opposite direction of the camera movement, which creates a sense of energy and excitement. In other shots, I added some handheld movement to keep things from getting too static, and I turned off image stabilization entirely on the iPhone to get that natural handheld look. If it were more of a calm video, I would have image stabilization enabled and use a gimbal to smoothen the shots further. Now, when I do those handheld camera movements, I still try to keep the camera steady and walk heel to toe, and with that natural movement from handheld shooting, it prevents the video from looking too robotic. Tip number 4 is to use voiceovers. Voiceovers are fantastic because they add a narrative that complements the visuals, making the message more engaging. Additionally, a voiceover also helps to make the message more clear and consistent throughout the video and sets the tone. Now, I aimed for a female motivational voiceover. The voiceover you heard was actually AI generated, which I find mind-blowing. This brings us to our sponsor of today's video, ARTLIST. Their new AI voiceover feature allows you to create natural and realistic voiceovers, and thanks to their intuitive user interface, generating voiceovers has never been easier. To get started, you can navigate to the AI voiceover page. From there, you can choose from a variety of voices. You can preview each voice by clicking on it.
I miss you, bro. Remember those summers at the basketball court? You were teaching me to shoot.
Now, I haven't found any other tool that does this better. You also have the option to select voices based on gender and video category to find the perfect match for your video. Now, once you've chosen a voice, it will appear to the left of the text box. Simply type in the text you want to convert into a voiceover and click generate. The process is quick and your voiceover will appear in your voiceover list. And what's really cool is that you can fine-tune your voiceovers by heading to the settings in the top right corner. You can adjust slider for emotional range, similarity to the original voice, and style boost. Then generate the new voiceover to see the changes. If you want to try a different voice, just return to the voice catalog and select a new one. The text box will update accordingly, and once you generate another voiceover, it will be added to your list, and if you're satisfied with the version, you can download and use it in your video projects. Now, as you can see, the workflow is seamless, and the best part is that you don't have to worry about copyright issues because ARTLIST takes care of everything. And this used to take days, but now just takes a few minutes. And these voiceovers can be used in a wide range of projects such as movies, trailers, commercials, documentaries, YouTube content, and much more. If you're interested, be sure to check out the link in the video description below to get an extra 2 months for free on your ARTLIST subscription. With that said, thanks again ARTLIST for sponsoring this video. Tip number 5 is to think about your beginning and end. If you know how you want to start and end the video, it makes things a lot easier. A strong beginning grabs the attention and a strong ending leaves a lasting impression. And for the running video, I plan to start with Megan arriving at the sports ground and then with ease into the warm-up and then hit the peak with the running part. And for the ending, I had a few ideas. So one was Megan stopping to catch her breath, continuing and then placing the title there. But since the video needed to be a bit longer, at least 20 seconds, I decided to use that clip as my second last shot. So the last shot I chose was her continuing to run and passing by the camera, which followed nicely from the previous shot. So as you can see, I like to have a few ending shots in mind just in case one doesn't work out. And then tip number 6 is to get a bit more creative and include a rack focus. And speaking of the last shot, you might have noticed the rack focus at the end. And I think it's a cool creative touch for the ending. It first focuses on the distant tracks, then shifts closer to blur out the background, making it perfect for the title. In the Final Cut Camera app, you can manually control the focus using the slider or just tap to set it. Now, if you want a breakdown of how I edit this cinematic running video, just let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to show you. It's quite a topic of its own. And if you're curious about the colors I use, they're from my premium mobile LUTs, where you can choose from different color presets to make your mobile videos pop. You can also check them out below. So I hope you found this video helpful and picked up some tips for your next project. Thanks a ton for watching, and see you in the next one.